Lady, I'm lucky if I make it to 18. We in the war. We graduating every day we live because we ain't afraid to die protecting our own.
Before I conducted any research, I thought I knew some of the factors that contributed to why many inner-city public high school students dropped out. Some of the factors I thought I knew included funding and available resources gap between suburban and inner-city schools, gang affiliation, needing to support their family, or think school is pointless. I also knew that inner-city public schools are more socially economically diverse, and that is a big factor that influences funding and resources for the schools. Because of the white flight that occurred in the 50s and 60s, middle and high-income Caucasian families left the city and into the suburb. Lower income minority families stayed in the city. I imagine I would find other factors that influence high school students to decide to drop out. For example, finding out if classroom structures and teachers have an effect on students' decision to drop out. I also imagine I would find explanations how ethnicity, home life, and socioeconomic status correlates with high school dropout rates. Throughout my research, I also imagine I would find information that regarded the correlation between poverty and success of schools. I also hope to find solutions to increase high school graduation rate and how much teachers and classroom structure can influence a decision to either stay or leave school. I also hope to find how social connections between teachers, friends, activities also affect a student's decision to drop out. I was initially interested in the topic of poverty and how it affects students perform academically. As I conducted more research, the topic of dropouts caught my interest, like why do suburban schools have lower dropout rates? I then decided to change my research question to figure out the factors causing high school students to drop out. I started with a general topic like high school dropouts. I then began to make my topics more specific because I was interested in why inner-city public high schools have significantly higher dropout rate. I narrowed this general topic even more by trying to focus on major cities where the dropout gap was large. Sam Dillon's article from the New York Times provided readers with statistics that prove that there is a gap between suburban and inner-city public high school dropouts. Sarah also supported this claim by using Chicago and surrounding suburbs of Chicago as an example. The large dark green district represents public schools, and they have had a 69.7% graduation rate compared to the 95 graduation rates for the block of high-performing suburban schools. Wright argued that the reasons why there is a gap is influenced by the funding gap and achievement gap. Funding gap. It portrays that many low-income minority students are prone to receive inferior facilities, less qualified teachers, and incomparable curriculum. The achievement gap. Many students in inner-city public schools pass students along to open seats for the next round of students. The No Child Left Behind law tried to close the gap between low-income minority students with high-income non-minority students. Dillon also argued that schools having access to qualified teachers help graduation rates. Similarly to Dillon's article, CBS argued that breaking schools up to have smaller enrollment increases student-teacher interaction, which is beneficial to both because teachers can see exactly where students are struggling, and students know that they have someone who is supporting them inside of the classroom. Dropout rates were significantly lower in schools with qualified teachers and smaller student-to-teacher ratio. Burgum and Lee also argued that school structure, enrollment size, academic organization, curriculum structure, and school social organization all have huge influences on students. Stevenson and Ellsworth also argued how home life influences the decision because many dropouts felt a lack of support. They mentioned two kinds of school process that contribute to students' idea of lack of support. General rule. When students claim these rules made them feel like children and caused transgressions against policies that involved punishment. Implicit messages negatively affect students because students notice the absence of assistance in response to their problems. Rumberger argued that poverty is a significant influencer in the dropout rates. Poverty affects not only the student and their family, but if a school or community is also impoverished, it contributes to the dropout crisis. This dropout crisis leads to imprisonment and life of crime by high school dropouts because Dillon, Fagan, and Pabon all argue that there is a correlation between crime and substance abuse with high school dropouts. Because of lack of opportunities in schools, many dropouts become affiliated with gangs or with substance abuse. For example, someone who has been in an abusive relationship tend to continue to be in an abusive relationship because that is what they're used to. This is similar to students who drop out. If they live around gangs, violence, substance abuse, they're more likely to join that lifestyle because that is what they're known. Burgum and Lee argued that high school dropouts are more likely to engage in crime, poor health, need welfare, or other forms of government help. They also argued that the risk factors of why students drop out are social risk, demographic factors associated with a higher likelihood of social difficulties, ethnicity, gender, social economic status, family structure, inner city residence, and academic risk. Students' school behavior and performance reflect actual manifestation of school-related issues, like leaving school seems like a solution to them, and younger children have a higher risk of dropping out early if their school experiences are not positive. Perez argued that because of support systems, smaller student-teacher ratio, and funding, Chicago public schools, for example, graduation rates has increased. Rumberger argued that averting the effects of poverty on school dropouts can be lessened through improving academic achievement, attitudes, and behaviors of students with tutoring, after-school programs, and schools should broaden their roles in students' lives outside of the classroom. These sources' arguments are valid because these authors are trying to expose readers how the high rate of inner-city dropouts can lead to imprisonment, gang affiliation, continuation of poverty. These sources are also trying to reach out to us and those who hold positions of power to try and create a universal design to help all of their students succeed inside and outside of the classroom. Since so many schools contain steep steps, lacking of funding, resources, socioeconomic and racial diversity, different home life, this often challenges many students to succeed and causes them to drop out. These articles are trying to get attention from the general public to recognize that the dropout rates are something we should not ignore. For example, New Mexico not counting students who dropped out before the 12th grade to lower the dropout rate because of the No Child Left Behind law that was enforced in 2002. These sources did provide some limitations because Fagan's and Pagan's, as well as Stevenson's and Ellsworth's articles, were both published around 30 years ago. However, from other sources that are more recent and the news, they also show correlation between crime rate, gang affiliation, and substance abuse with dropouts. While the students who voiced their reason to drop out was 30 years ago, these reasons they expressed were also present in more recent studies that explain some of the reasons high school students dropped out, like Lee's and Burkham's article. These sources are all relevant to my research topic because they provide statistics, interviews from inner-city public high school dropouts, and explanations as to why students who are enrolled in inner-city schools tend to drop out more than suburban high schools. These sources answer my questions because each source explains and provides statistics relating to one or more factors that influence students to decide to drop out. I think organizations like America's Promise Alliance, teachers, members of Board of Education, students, and their guardians should understand this research because students should be able to have a support system inside and outside of the classroom, as well as be able to have opportunities to pursue higher education. Understanding this information would be beneficial to try and decrease the rates of dropout because many people fail to acknowledge that the reasons why students drop out is more complex than them not liking school. Knowing that the factors are not just black and white can help teachers find new methods to get students engaged and feel support. Some questions I still have are, how can we increase funding for public schools without receiving backlash from raising taxes? How can we get quality teachers for all schools? Since smaller enrollment is beneficial for teachers and students, how can we get the funding to pursue? If decreasing high school dropout rate, will it affect imprisonment and crime rates? Some of the things I might have needed to know that I wasn't able to learn would be programs and laws that try to decrease dropout rates and find solutions to have students feel supported and included inside of the class. And what are some ways we can help inner city public schools?
This check that I donated is a call to action. I'm challenging major companies and corporations in Chicago and all across the U.S. to donate and to take action. The CPS students have spoken and would like corporations to invest in them as we've invested in their businesses. So I'll be donating $10,000 to different Chicago public high schools, starting with Westcott Elementary. The blessings come down.